So if you let me kind of give a cartoon, the depiction of the problem we are considering. So let us say, we have a domain, two-dimensional domain. So this is the domain and it has some thickness. So let us say this is the thickness. So the thickness is let us say h, and the coordinates in the other two dimensions is xy, and z is along the thickness. So first, where do we use, and the loading is along xy, so there is no loading along z. So the loading is whether the distributed over the entire volume or on the boundaries. So the loading is only along x and y directions. There is no loading along z. So that is the case we are considering. Now we treat the problem as a plane stress problem. If for plane stress we will have the thickness h. I have shown this thickness h. So h is small compared to in plane dimensions. In plane means along x and y. So if thickness is very small compared to the dimensions along x and y, then we treat the problem as a plane stress problem. And if it is a plane stress problem, then in that case, sigma zz, tau xz and tau yz are going to be 0. So plane stress h is very small. You will have sigma zz, tau xz, tau yz, all three will be equal to 0. And for plane strain problem, h, so the example for plane stress would be like, you have a thin disk or a screen hanging and under its self weight. So those are some examples of plane stress where thickness is very small compared to the other dimensions. So then no sigma zz, tau xz and tau yz would be 0. That would be a plane stress problem. And in plane strain problem, h is large compared to in plane dimensions, that is dimensions along x and y, compared to in plane dimensions. And so in this case, you will have basically epsilon zz, epsilon zz, gamma xz and gamma yz, where epsilon zz is normal strain along z direction, gamma xz is the normal strain in the xz plane, and gamma yz is the normal strain along the yz plane. So these are equal to 0. So now the example is, if you look at a dam. So if you are analyzing the dam wall, so along the length of the dam wall, if you take z direction, so that dimension is very large. So epsilon zz, gamma xz and gamma yz would be 0, and you can model just one cross section of the wall. So that would be, the xy would be along the cross section of the wall, and you can model that as a plane strain problem. Or if you have a very long shaft, so you can say when you analyze a cross section, that would be essentially a under torsional loading, let us say, under the torsional loading, if you have, or if it is rotating, you can treat that as a plane strain problem. So am I audible?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So now, having defined what is plane stress problem and what is plane strain problem, so let me also give you some basic concepts involving the finite element formulation of these. So first thing is displacement. So if you look at the displacement, so I think, I presume that you know some basic concepts of solid mechanics, and you would have done, of course, so many lectures you've already done in FEM, so you know this. So the displacements, say we have two displacement components for both, whether it is a plane stress problem or plane strain problem, two independent displacements, u as a function of xy, this is the displacement along x, this is along x, and we have v, the displacement which is also a function of x, and that is the displacement along y. So these are the two displacement independent no unknowns of the problem, u and v. And in a displacement based finite element formulation, we treat these u and v as the basic unknowns of the problem. Then if you look at the strains, so again I am talking about the independent strain components. So the strains are again three components which are non-zero and independent for both the problems. So epsilon xx is del u by del x. Epsilon y, so epsilon xx is the normal strain along x direction. Epsilon yy is the normal strain along y direction. So that is del v by del y. And the shear strain, that is change in angle between any two line elements parallel to x and y. So which is gamma xy, that is del u by del y plus del v by del x. So these are the strain displacement relations. So of course we are assuming that displacement gradients are small. So in the quadratic terms in these strain expressions are assumed to be negligible. So I am assuming that displacement gradients are small. Then if you look at the stresses, again the independent non-zero stresses. So for this, when I am going to write the relationship between stress and strain, I am assuming here that the material is linear, elastic, isotropic. Yeah, and so the material is linear, elastic, isotropic. And so for this, if you look at now, if I look at the plane stress case, so in the two cases the relationship between stresses and strains is going to be different. So let me write that in a matrix and vector form. So sigma xx, sigma yy, and tau xy. For this linear elastic isotropic material under plane stress condition, the stresses can, because our basic unknowns are the displacements u and v, so we express strain in terms of gradients of displacements, and then stresses in terms of displacement, and ultimately in terms of gradients of displacements u and v. So this is for the plane stress problem. You have for the linear elastic isotropic material, this relationship is E upon 1 minus nu square 1 nu 0 nu 1 0 0 0 1 minus nu by 2 into epsilon xx, epsilon yy, and gamma xy. So let me write this in a symbolic form, so I can say that this is sigma, this the sigma xx, sigma yy, tau xy is denoted by sigma, and this the matrix we have, this matrix, this is, let us say, be denoted by C, and then we have the strain as vector epsilon. This is your C. So you can write the stress strain relationship in this form for plane stress case. For plane strain case, the form of the relationship is going to be same. Only thing is C, the the constitutive matrix. C is known as constitutive matrix. So the constitutive matrix C is going to be, for the plane strain case, E upon 1 plus nu into 1 minus 2 nu. Of course, I am not starting from the generalized Hooke's law, and then generalized Hooke's law for the linear elastic isotropic material, and then imposing the condition that epsilon zz is equal to 0, you can arrive at this constitutive relation. So this is 1 minus nu 0, nu 1 minus nu and 0 0 0 1 minus 2 nu by 2. So this is the basically constitutive matrix. This C is constitutive matrix. So हेलो, I have a lecture. नहीं, अभी तो मेरा लेक्चर है. So we have this C as the constitutive matrix, And then next thing is, because we are going to develop the element level governing equations using the principle of stationary total potential energy. So let me also give you the expression for total potential energy. So first we start with strain energy. So displacement, strain, stress, and then strain energy. So when you write the strain energy, let me use the notation pi for the strain energy. So pi is going to be, now as you know, the expression, general expression for the strain energy, you will have 6 components, but here we have three, only 3 non-zero component of stresses and strains both. And the strain per unit volume is half of sigma xx, epsilon xx, and so on. So when we integrate, because these quantities are constant, sigma xx, sigma yy, tau xy, epsilon xx, epsilon yy, and gamma xy are constant through the thickness. So we carry out the integration through the thickness. So let us say thickness is h, so h by 2, and then integration over area, and this area is in xy plane. So the strain energy is going to be sigma xx into epsilon xx plus sigma yy into epsilon yy plus tau xy into gamma xy dA. So this is the strain energy. What you can actually do, you can write this expression as integration over area in the xy plane basically, and this can be written as, we have already written the sigma in the vector form. So sigma transpose into epsilon dA. And then now, because we are talking about the displacement based formulation, so we express stress in terms of strain. So h by 2 integration over area, and then sigma we have already written c into epsilon. Only c will be different for plane stress and plane strain, other things remain same. So sigma is c into epsilon, so its transpose would be epsilon transpose into C transpose, and since C is symmetric, constitutive matrix is symmetric, so C transpose is equal to C into epsilon dA. So yeah, this is going to be the strain energy expression. Then now total potential energy will be consisting of strain energy and the potential of externally applied loads. So now let me write the total potential energy functional. So let me write that, denote it as I. So I will be consisting of strain energy. So that is basically h by 2 integration over area, and then I have just written this expression, epsilon transpose C into epsilon dA, and then the potential of, so let us say we have the forces distributed over the entire volume along x and y direction. So the potential of those forces would be minus, again integration over area, and that would be u and v transpose into, let us say, the body forces I am denoting as fbx, fby, and then dA. So this is the potential of externally applied body forces. So force per unit volume along x, force per unit volume along y. Now if you integrate through the thickness, so you can actually multiply. So you can say in this case fbx and fby are the actually force per unit area. So if you multiply this expression by h, then they will become force per unit volume, fbx and fby. And then we will have the forces along the boundary also, so that is minus integration over the boundary, and then you have uv transpose into the forces along x direction in the boundary and forces along y direction in the boundary into the integration along the boundary of the element. So this is the expression for total potential energy. So as I told you, this is the strain energy, this is the potential of externally applied body forces, and this is the potential of externally applied boundary forces. So this is the final thing, the total potential energy functional I, and based on this we are going to do the finite element formulation. So now if you look at the finite element formulation, so four important things. Finite element formulation. So by now you would have learned what are the basic steps involved in the finite element formulation. So I'm only going to talk about how we use the approximate solution in this case. So then in the finite element formulation, what are the requirements of approximate solution? So there are 4 things for 2D and 3D problems. One is the differentiability. So I will explain these, what these mean. Second is the inter-element compatibility. Inter-element compatibility. Third is the completeness. And fourth is geometric invariance. So now if you look at, and I hope somebody is recording the lecture, because if you need the recorded lecture, then you should record it. I forgot to tell you. Yeah, you are recording it, right?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So now suppose if you look at the differentiability requirement, so whatever approximate solution we assume within an element, that should be differentiable up to the highest order derivative present in the integral functional, or if you are directly from the differential equation you are using weak form, then it should be differentiable up to the highest order derivative present. Hello, are there any questions? Yeah, I'm hearing some voice. So are there any questions? So yeah, the differentiability requirement is with the whatever approximate solution we assume, it should be differentiable up to the high, at least up to the highest order derivative present in the integral functional. So in this case, the highest order derivatives of u and v are the first order derivatives. So whatever approximate solution we assume, it should be differentiable at least once with respect to x and y. No, the same thing, same conclusion we will come from the the big form also. Then inter-element compatibility is that the primary variables. So in this case, the primary variables are geometric quantities u and v. So primary variables should be continuous across the element boundaries. So that is known as the inter-element compatibility. And then the completeness means whatever polynomial you assume as an approximate solution, so it should have constant term, it should have linear term, so that it represents the rigid body motion and the constant state of stress and strain. So and that means so whatever is the highest power of x and y is there in the approximate solution, so all the lower power terms should be present in the solution. So that is the completeness. And geometric invariance means for 2D and 3D problems, if we interchange x and y or x, y and z, the form of solutions should not change. So that is the geometric invariance. So we have to make sure that whatever element we formulate or use, it's the approximate solution for that element satisfies all these criteria. And if it satisfies all these criteria, then the element will give you the monotonic convergence. That means when you keep on increasing the number of elements, the solution would converge to exact solution of the problem. So now let me, before I move on to the isoparametric formulation, as I said, let me also talk about how the compatibility conditions are satisfied if we do the finite element formulation in physical coordinate. That means we assume the approximate solution directly in terms of x and y. So formulation in physical coordinates. Physical coordinates. So that is x and y. So in this case, as I said, from the differentiability requirement, the highest order derivative is first derivative. So whatever approximate solution we assume within the element, it should be differentiable at least once with respect to x and y. So that means it should have a linear term in x and linear term in y, and then from the completeness requirement it should have a constant term also in it. So the solution can be assumed as minimum is a0 plus a1x plus a2y. So similarly the unknown v, the unknown displacement v along y direction, can be assumed as b0 plus b1x plus b2 into y. Now so this it satisfies the differentiability requirement, it satisfies the geometric invariance, that is if I interchange x and y, the form of the approximate solution is still same. It satisfies the completeness requirement because I have highest powers of x and y only one, so before that we will have a constant term, so that is present, so it satisfies that condition. Now how do we satisfy the inter-element compatibility? So the primary variables should be continuous across the element boundaries. So and here the primary variables are u and v. So that means no, the in the 2D you can lowest thing you can think of is a triangular element. So no, in 2D problems you can think of no simplest element as a triangular element with 3 nodes. So 3 corner nodes, 1, 2 and 3. And because no, if we want to make sure that the primary variables, that is u and v, are continuous across the element boundaries, then we should have, first thing is u and v should be there as degrees of freedom at the nodes of the element. So we should have no here u1 and v1 as the degrees of freedom, and of course the coordinates are x1 and y1. Add node to the degrees of freedom are u2 and v2, the values of variable u2 and v2, the coordinates are x2 and y2, and at node 3 the variables are u3 v3 and the coordinates are x3 and y3. So now so if you look at we have the primary variables, that is u and v, as the degrees of freedom at the corner nodes. That means we have within the element we have 3 unknowns u1 u2 u3, and in the approximate solution also we have 3 constant a0 a1 a2. So we can express a0 a1 a2 in terms of 3 unknowns u1 u2 u3. Similarly in the approximate solution for v we have unknowns b0 b1 and b2, so they can be expressed in terms of v1 v2 and v3, 3 unknowns within the element. So now one thing is that number of unknown constants in the approximate solution should match with the number of unknown degrees of freedom for the element, that is elemental degrees of freedom. So now whether it will satisfy the compatibility or not, that is a continuity of u and v across the elements. So let us say that we have not just a simple domain, a rectangular domain, and we discretize this into 4 triangles, 3 noded triangles. So now let me number these triangles as 1, 2, 3 and 4, and of course these are the nodes, one center node and these corner nodes. Now if I take a line along AB, so if I go from A to B, so this line is shared by element 1 and 2. So the compatibility requires that U should be continuous along AB and V should be continuous along AB. What does it mean is that if we find out no variation of U along AB from element 1, and we find out the variation of U along AB from element 2, the two must be same. Then there is a continuity of U, and similarly for V. So that is what is the meaning of compatibility. So already we have now the element which has got U and V as the degrees of freedom at the corner nodes. So anyway at A and B during the assembly we would say that U at node 1 A from element 1 and 2 is same, V at node A from the element 1 and 2 is same. Similarly at B the value of U and V from all the 4 elements will be imposed as same. So at A and B, no, the U and V are same from element 1 and 2. That is already enforced in the assembly process. But then we need to make sure in 2D and 3D problems that along the boundaries of the element also there should be U and V should be continuous. So will it be continuous or not if at A and B the values of U and V are same from the element 1 and 2? So for that let us see, if you look at the equation of line AB. So the equation of line AB is y is equal to mx plus c. So if I put this in, say, when I look at the u along AB, so u along AB would be A naught plus A1x plus A2 into y is along AB is mx plus c. So you will see that this is A naught plus A2c is the constant term, and then A1 plus A2 into m is a linear term. So you will see along AB, line AB, the variation of u is linear in x. So if it is linear in x, so at node A and B, both elements say 1 and 2 have got same values of u and b. And then if we fit a straight line from A to B, it is going to be unique because at A and B, u and v are same. So along the entire line AB, the values of u and b would be same whether you work out from element 1 or element 2. So this set says that the compatibility condition is satisfied. Compatibility condition is satisfied for this case. Of course, the rest of the formulation I am not discussing. I suppose somebody would have discussed the constant strain triangle. So what you do is you express A0, A1, A2 in terms of U1, U2, U3, B0, B1, B2 in terms of V1, V2, V3. Then you get the U and B in terms of area coordinates, and then substitute this approximate solution in the total potential energy functional and take variation of that equal to 0. From there you get the element level governing equation, and then you assemble and solve the problem. Now if you take a again now the next kind of element we can think of course in the triangle, the next is you can think of a 6-noded triangle. I'm not discussing that. Then you think of a 4-noded. Now let me talk of a arbitrary quadrilateral. So 4-noded quadrilateral element. So now if we are doing the formulation in the physical coordinate space, so what we would be doing is, let us say this is a quadrilateral and these are the xy coordinates and it has 4 nodes, because quadrilateral means we have to have 4 nodes. So these are the local node numbers 1, 2, 3 and 4. And since now again I just said we have to have primary variables as degrees of freedom at the nodes, so we will have u1 v1, and of course the xy coordinates would be x1 and y1. We will have u2 v2 and the coordinates as x2 y2 and so on, same thing at 3 and 4. So now if this is an arbitrary quadrilateral, the approximate solution will have a0 plus a1x plus a2y. So because now we have 4 degrees of freedom for u in the element, so we should have 4 unknown constants in the approximate solution. So the next term we add is a3xy. So why xy? Why not x square or y square? Because if we add xy, this the expression approximate solution is geometrically invariant. So we replace interchange x and y, the form of the expression is still the same. But if we use the fourth term as x square or y square, it will not be geometrically invariant. So we choose these terms of course from the Pascal's triangle. So now similarly b will be b0 plus b1x plus b2y plus b3xy, and of course for the formulation what you have to do is then you can say that x1 y1 u is equal to u1 and so on. So you you can express a0 a1 a2 a3 in terms of u1 u2 u3 u4. Similarly b0 b1 b2 b3 you can express in terms of b1 b2 b3 and b4 in terms of nodal degrees of elemental degrees of freedom. But the main thing I wanted to talk about here is the compatibility condition. So now if you look at the compatibility condition, so whether it is satisfied or not, so let us check that. So compatibility means we are talking across the elements, so we should consider an assembly of elements. So let us say we have this rectangular domain, but we discretize this into no arbitrary quadrilaterals. So let us say not the rectangles but arbitrary quadrilaterals. So these are the arbitrary quadrilaterals and these are the nodes, and this is a the element is a general quadrilateral, and here we will have say x and y. The elements are, let us say this is 1, this is 2, this is element number 3, and this is element number 4. I'm just demonstrating through a simple example. So now for this arbitrary quadrilateral assembly, now the compatibility requires that, suppose if we look at the displacement u or v variation along AB from element 1 or 3, because we can get variation of u along AB from element 1 also, we can get the variation of u along AB from element 3, but the compatibility requires that no, it should be same from whether we calculate it from element 1 or 3. So that is continuity of primary variables, that is in this case displacement and u and v should be there. Now already at A and B, the values of u and v from both the elements are same, that we are already enforcing, because at nodes we have u and v as the degrees of freedom. During assembly we say that node A of element 1 and node A of element 3 has the same values of u and v. Similarly, node B, value of u at node B from element 1 and 3 same, and so on. So at A and B they are anyway continuous, whether you get the value of u from element 1 or 3 at A or B will be same, but it should be same along AB. So will it be same? That's the question. So how do we check that? So for that, now let us look at again line AB is a straight line, because we are talking about no quadrilateral element with straight edges. So again, if you look at the line AB, so the equation of line AB is again linear, is the equation of line. So we can either express y in terms of x or x in terms of y. You can do any one thing. So you can write mx plus c, because that constant has to be satisfied that we are moving along line AB. Now if you look at u along AB, so u along AB means this is the expression. In this we put y equal to mx plus c. So we write a0 plus a1x plus a2 into mx plus c plus a3x into mx plus c. So now if you look at, you can see that now if you collect the terms, so you can write this as a0 plus a2c constant term, and then the term linear in x, so that would be a1 plus a2m plus a3c into x, and plus we will have no a3m into x square. So now if you see along line AB, because it was arbitrary quadrilateral, if it was actually a rectangle, then we would have got y equal to constant, then u along AB or v along AB would have been linear in x. But since this is arbitrary quadrilateral, so along AB we have u as a quadratic in x. So now quadratic in x means there are three constants. So now the two constants of course can be worked out based on the same values of u at node A from element 1 and 3, and same values of u at node B from element 1 and 3. But then the third constant would depend on the values of the displacements at the other nodes of the element 1 and the other nodes of the element 3. So we will not get the same variation of u along AB from the element 1 and 3. Rather what you will actually get is something like this. No, because this is quadratic. If it was linear, then we will get a unique variation from both the elements, the same variation. But since this is quadratic and only two values are common between element 1 and 3 at A and B, so we cannot uniquely get UAB from element 1 and 3. So this will give you, see if I go along length along AB, so let me write that as length along AB as SAB, and this side is UAB. So the variation at A there would be some value, and at B let us say some value. In between now this variation is quadratic. So this will be say from one element, and this would be from another element. So this is from no element let us say 1, and this is from element 3. So what you will observe, this is point A, and of course this is point. At A and B, both the elements 1 and 3 are giving you same values of u and same values of v, but in between the values of u and v predicted from element 1 and 3 are going to be different. So the inter-element compatibility is not satisfied. So you can say from, you can conclude from here that the inter-element compatibility is not satisfied. Yeah, please, you can ask me anytime. No, you can stop me and ask questions if you have any doubts and questions on this. So now if you have what we observe here, that if we assume the approximate solutions for u and v directly in the xy coordinate space, physical coordinate space. So for the arbitrary quadrilateral, no, the inter-element compatibility condition will not be satisfied. So that is why there is a need, no, the most compelling need for the finite element formulation in natural coordinate space, particularly for 2D and 3D problems, is the inter-element compatibility requirement. So that is why there is a need to formulate the element in the physical coordinate space, natural coordinate space. So formulation in natural coordinate space. So so now what I am talking about here is that now when you say the formulation in natural coordinate space, so then what we are going to do is that the in the xy, because actual problem a domain is in the physical coordinate space, xy coordinate space. So we have x and y, and the to discretize the physical domain, we need arbitrary quadrilateral because the boundaries are irregular. So we have in the physical coordinate space, the element is a 4-noded, let us say, quadrilateral, arbitrary quadrilateral. And here the coordinates are x1, y1, x2, y2, and x3, y3, and x4 and y4. And the primary variables have to be degrees of freedom at the nodes. So you will have u1, v1, u2, v2, and so on. Now what we do, we map this element to the natural coordinates space. What are natural coordinates? Natural coordinates are coordinates which vary from -1 to +1. So those coordinates we call as natural coordinates. So now this element, arbitrary quadrilateral in xy coordinate space, is mapped to square in the natural coordinate space. And let us say the natural coordinates are xi and eta. The nodes are 1, 2, and 3, 3 and 4. So this node 1 in the physical coordinate space is mapped to node 1 in the natural coordinate space. Similarly, node 2 is mapped to the natural coordinate space node 2, and similarly 3 and 4. And the coordinates here are -1, -1. The coordinate of node 2 in the natural coordinate is 1 and -1. 3 is 1 and 1, and 4 is -1 and 1. So these are the natural coordinates. So now the one is that we map the element arbitrary quadrilateral from physical coordinate, that is xy space, to xi eta space, and then we assume all the approximate solutions in terms of natural coordinates, that is xi and eta. So then you will assume, let us say, u is equal to a0 plus a1 xi plus a2 eta, and since there are 4 nodes, and at each node we have 1 degree of freedom corresponding to u, and at each node 1 degree of freedom corresponding to v. So we have 4 degrees of freedom corresponding to u in the element, 4 degrees of freedom corresponding to v in the element. So we assume an approximate solution which has 4 unknown constants. So a0, a1, a2, and a3 into xi eta. Similarly, V, you assume the approximate solution V within the element as B0 plus B1 xi plus B2 eta plus B3 xi eta. And now you also have to relate the coordinates xy and xi eta. Those coordinates also have to be related, because when we go to the integral functional, the integration is with respect to physical coordinate space, and the derivatives are with respect to physical coordinate space. So those have to be related in terms of derivatives with respect to natural coordinates. So we need also the relationship between x and y. So x is also written in terms of xi and eta. So x is equal to c0 plus c1 xi plus c2 eta plus c3 xi eta, and y is written as, say, d0 plus d1 xi plus d2 eta plus d3 xi eta. Now let us say, and we have the whether the compatibility condition, other things it is satisfying. Whatever I talked about, no, the four requirements of an approximate solution. So except compatibility, other things it is satisfying. Let us check whether it is satisfying the compatibility condition or not. So again, what you will do, we will consider the physical coordinate space. So discretize the element in terms of arbitrary quadrilateral like this, and say this is element 1, this is element 2, this is 3, and this is 4, and these are the nodes, and let us say we take any common boundary. Let us say, let me take this time this boundary AB, this common boundary between element 1 and 2. So now if we look at the variation of u along AB from element 1, and if we look at the variation of u or v along AB from element 2, so they should be same, no, for to satisfy the compatibility condition, that is continuity of u and v along AB from element 1 and 2. So irrespective of what the element is in the physical coordinate space, each element here, now each element is mapped to a square in the natural coordinate space, because now the formulation is in the natural coordinate space xi eta, and so these are the local node numbers 1 2 3 and 4. So each element is mapped to basically this square master element, that is also known as the master element. So when I move along AB, whether I am on element 1 or 2, so no, the like as AB along AB would be moving along, when I'm moving along AB within the element 1, so I will be moving along node 2 to 3 in the natural coordinate space, and there xi is constant. When I am moving no, along no element along AB within element 2, same line but belonging to element 2, so I would be moving along no line element in the natural coordinate space, I would be moving along line 1 to 4. So there also xi is equal to constant. So you can say when we move along AB, we have xi is equal to a constant, whether we are moving along AB within element 1 or we are moving along AB within element 2, xi is going to be constant. So if xi is constant, so then if you look at expression for u AB, u along AB, so it is going to be a0 plus a1 into c plus a2 into eta and plus a3 c into eta, because xi is a constant. So you can say that this is nothing but a0 plus a1c is a constant term, and a2 plus a3c into eta is a linear term. So you can say that u or v, similarly for v also you can see the similar expression. So u or v along AB are going to vary as a linear function of eta. So if they are going to vary as a linear function of eta, and at A and B both elements 1 and 2 have same value of u and same value of v, so we will have a unique variation. So when we move along line AB, so if I go along a distance along AB and then u along AB, so I am going from node 1 to node A to node B, both elements are going to give you a linear variation, and this will be from element 1 as well as from element 2. So that means there is a continuity of u and v along AB. Similarly, we will have continuity along this line, we will have continuity along this line, we will have continuity along this line. So even the element in the physical coordinate space is a arbitrary quadrilateral, but the compatibility condition is satisfied in the if we are using the formulation in the natural coordinate space. So that is the beauty of this, and that is why natural coordinate formulation is a must for the the quadrilateral elements in 2D and brick elements in 3D. So that is why these are used, so that we can satisfy the inter-element compatibility conditions. Hello, am I audible? Yeah, I think no, you can stop me in between and ask questions. Hello, am I audible?
Yes, sir.
Are there any questions? I think the participants, are there any questions? Okay, so let me then continue. So I am saying that no, we are formulating the element using the natural coordinate formulation, so the compatibility condition is ensured. If we have primary variables as degrees of freedom at the nodes of the elements, and so then the continuity condition is satisfied. So you can say here this means this is linear in eta, and that means we will have unique variation along line AB. Unique means same from both elements. Unique variation of U and V along AB from elements 1 and 2. From elements 1 and 2. And that means we can say, deduce from that, inter-element compatibility is satisfied. Inter-element compatibility is satisfied. So this is the main reason of using the formulation in natural coordinate space. Of course, other advantages are that the integration becomes with the limits -1 to +1, so that becomes uniform. But the main advantage is that these natural coordinate formulated elements satisfy the inter-element compatibility as long as primary variables are there as degrees of freedom at the nodes of the element. Now, coming to the, because I said I will be talking about isoparametric formulation. So let me define what is isoparametric formulation, subparametric formulation, and superparametric formulation. So all are the formulation in the natural coordinate space. So let me talk of isoparametric formulation. So as I said, when we are doing the formulation in the natural coordinate space, we are approximating both field variables u and v and physical coordinates x and y in terms of zeta eta. So depending on how we interpolate the field variables and physical coordinates, we have three different formulations in the natural coordinate space. So isoparametric formulation means interpolation of geometry. Geometry means x and y coordinates. So like here I had written, if you see, I had written these are the field variables u and v, and these are the physical coordinates x and y. So both of them are interpolated using the same kind of polynomial in xi and eta. So this is known as isoparametric formulation. So in isoparametric formulation, interpolation of geometry, that is xy, and field variables, that is field variables means unknowns are u and v, field variables, that is u and v. So the interpolation of geometry and field variables is same. So if we do this kind of a formulation, it is known as isoparametric. Iso means same, and parametric means the interpolation is same in terms of zeta eta for the geometry xy and field variables u and v. So then there is another one which is known as the subparametric formulation. Subparametric formulation. So in case of subparametric formulation, the interpolation of basically geometry, interpolation of geometry, that is xy, is of lower degree compared to interpolation of field variables. U and v. So that means we use the lower degree polynomial for u and v, and the lower degree polynomial for x and y, and higher degree polynomial for u and v. That kind of a formulation is known as subparametric formulation. And then we have superparametric formulation. Of course, the most common formulation is the isoparametric formulation. So then we have what is known as superparametric formulation. So this is opposite of subparametric formulation. In this case, the interpolation of geometry, that is xy is of higher degree. Higher degree means you have higher degree polynomial. Like now in the geometry you have zeta square, eta square terms also, whereas in field variable u and v you have say zeta eta terms only. So in